Okay. All right. Oh, my heavens. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the stream today. Actually, there's nobody here right now, so I'm just going to take a quick second and adjust this. Okay. Okay. So this is my little corner. My husband said I should do this from the closet, just because that is the only place I can go to have really any peace and quiet. So you might hear kids yelling in the background, but that is totally apropos for this whole idea, which is, first of all, diapers on a plane, and second of all, homeschool. So the irony is that I got on a little bit late because Tuesday is actually the day that I have set up for my kids to do a group teen discussion. So I actually really just recently started this, and it is one of the most exciting things that I feel like we are doing currently right now in our homeschool journey right now. So I'm just going to take a quick minute because nobody's here yet to see if I can just look at a few things. I am fairly new to, here we go. Okay, so today I would love to chat about homeschooling. And I'm just going to pull up a list of questions that I prepared that I wanted to go over. And I would love if anybody wants to pop in and ask their own questions about the things that they really want to know about. So if you are here because you think that I know anything about anything, you are in for a wild ride, because the only thing that I am an expert in is my own opinion. So that's what we're here for. I am not here to give anybody advice. I'm not here to tell anybody they're doing anything wrong. I am not here to say what's right or wrong. I am really just here to talk about my own opinions about pretty much everything. And I'm really excited to start this podcast because we have a good community here on YouTube, our Diapers on a Plane, World Schooling, Homeschooling, Unschooling community. And I am just somebody who loves the pursuit of humanity and knowledge. So that is really what it boils down to when it comes to the question of why did you decide to homeschool? So it's always the first question that everybody asks and the first question that everybody wants to know. So when I was in school, primarily middle school, high school was touch and go, but I really had a hard time in school. I really, really did not like it. And I was bored to tears. I was bored to tears all the way from when I was little. And I just didn't enjoy school. And so when I thought about putting my kids in school, it just didn't really appeal to me. But the biggest reason is that when I started having children and they became public school aged kids, I was working for an airline. And so I had flight benefits. And my husband was working for the Disney Corporation. And so he had access to Disney. You get what's called a silver pass, and you get to go into Disneyland. You get to bring people in with you if you want to. And I just felt like if I put my kids in public school, how are we ever going to go travel? How are we going to use these flight benefits? How are we going to use these Disney benefits? How are we going to go out and see the world? And I was like, oh, perfect. Natural solution, homeschooling. So then I really started integrating myself into learning everything that I could about how could I give my kids the best education at home? Now, inevitably, everybody always asks like, well, what qualifies you to homeschool your kids? Well, I'm their mother. And that's the qualification. That's the only qualification that I feel like anybody needs. Again, my expert opinion. But I did go on to graduate college. So when I graduated from high school, I was like, this is the pits. I'm never going to go to school again. And then through a series of events, I ended up enrolling at a local community college, and I loved it so much that I ended up graduating with 2 degrees and a minor. So I have a degree in English, philosophy, and psychology. And my husband also, kind of same scenario, did not love high school. And now he is a director at a college. So college professor, college director. So I think that we have a few qualifications that have given us some experience in life. And really, that's what I think it boils down to is how, what do you want your children to get out of life? And those are your qualifications for homeschooling. And I will die on that hill. I believe that that is really everything it boils down to. So that is our story. That's why we decided to homeschool. And those are our qualifications. And we went from there. So my homeschool people, okay, the next question that everybody asks me always is, what is the curriculum that you use? And I'm an unschooler, so I don't use curriculum. I do not buy The Good and the Beautiful. I do not buy Charlotte Mason. And I do not come home and give my kids tasks to do. Now, everybody does unschooling a little bit different. And for the first 10 years, for the whole time that I worked at an airline, we used World School. That's how we schooled. So homeschool traditionally is the way that people honestly like think about it is homeschool is you have a curriculum, you've purchased a curriculum, and you emulate school in your house with your own curriculum, but you determine the hours and the parameters and the environment and all of that. Then there's like road schooling where you're in a camper and you're on the road and you school that way. And then there's world schooling, which you can imagine is the same thing. Like you're traveling around the world and your school is learning about the world. And we totally did that. And it was so incredible. And then there's also, unschooling, which is you don't follow a curriculum or a set schedule. And everybody's unschooling looks a little bit different. For me, unschooling looked like, well, I do want you to learn the basics. And I do want you to learn the basics. In the beginning, I was like, I had a timeline for learning the basics. As I got more familiar with that all children are different, I came to a recognition that it didn't necessarily have to be on a timetable, but it was something that I did want them to learn. So all the basics when it comes to math, multiplication, division, algebra, reading, how to research, typing, all those basic things, right, that you need to know in order to do the next things, right? Like people inevitably will be like, well, do you even teach your children how to read? And I'll be like, well, I did tell you that they're researching something on the computer, so they would therefore have to know how to read. So, but I know other parents that unschool and they don't force their children to learn how to read, and eventually they learn. So my second daughter is a great example of that. I did force her to read. I tried so hard for years and years and years. When we would sit down, we would try different methods. The books that I used on my twins, she just had no interest in. She didn't want to learn. When she wanted to learn, I tried to teach her sign language when she was little, and she didn't want to do it. So she taught herself she learned how to talk, right? She just started talking. She didn't want to learn how to swim. So she just started swimming. Like she didn't want to go through the motions of like holding, she just did it. She didn't want to be potty trained. She just knew how. So that was just her way of doing things. So when it came to reading, she didn't want to sit down and go through the letters and go through the sounds. And she just wouldn't do it. I mean, defiant to like the utmost degree. She just did not want to do it. So finally, I sat down with her every day. I sat down with her every day. So finally one day she's like, okay, I'm going to read. And I was like, great. And I got out the reading book and she just knew how. She had just learned through osmosis, probably listening and watching. Hello. My go-to, sorry, that's not a question. I definitely need glasses to read, and it took me a minute. That was like a prompt from YouTube, I guess. So anyway, if you're watching, I would love to hear your questions. So I am just going on about some questions that I prepared that most people ask me all the time, but I would love to hear if you have anything specific. Okay. So that unschooling can look different for everybody. So whether or not you, whatever you decide, whether you decide a curriculum or whether you decide schooling, right? And this goes out to all the homeschool moms too, is that I really believe that if you just care about your children, whatever you decide is really great for them. So I do think we do finally have, best family reviews. Thank you. Hi, audio. Great. I really needed to know because I forgot to turn on my mic when I first started it. So, okay. So, what does that bring us to? So the curriculum that I use, I still don't use a curriculum, but everybody like wants to know constantly. I get asked at the dentist, at the doctor, at the grocery store, in the parking lot, at church. Everybody wants to know, what curriculum do you use? So I started saying I use the Around the World curriculum. And there is no such thing. If you Google Around the World curriculum, as far as I know, it doesn't exist. But it harkens back to our world schooling days when we let the world be our classroom. And that is my philosophy about schooling your kids. Number one, instill in your children a love of everything around them, and instill in your children that they don't know it all, right? We have a huge epidemic of people in this world, in this country, in our lives that think they know everything. And I always hearken it to this because I remember when I was in college, I would show up and I'd be a little bit late and I would take me a minute to catch up. And I always would come into class and a question would be asked. And I'd be like, "Oh, I have a comment on that." But I would reserve my comments because I realized I had missed a section of the lecture and I needed to catch myself up before I immediately jumped in and was like, I already know what y'all are talking about. We can learn from each other. And this, right? Again, I'm just an expert on my own opinion. But that is what I want to teach my kids is there's always a scenario where somebody knows more than you. There's always a situation where somebody knows more than you. There is always a happenstance where you don't know everything. And so what I want to instill in my family and my children and growing up in this world is that you always have something to learn and you don't know everything. And the world is full of people and places and history and things that can teach us something. And so that is my philosophy. That is my philosophy about homeschooling. Homeschooling is just the umbrella of taking your children's education into your own hands. So that's what we do. And so what does it look like? What does it look like on a regular day? Thank you for everybody watching. If you have any questions, please pop them in. This is all about questions that you have about homeschooling. I am just going off a list that I prepared until I get some questions from any of you. So what does it look like for us on a normal everyday basis? So when we are at our home base, we call it our home base. We actually have not been traveling for quite a while, but what I would, in a perfect world, what I would envision is we have a home. It's called our home base. This is how we did it before. And then we leave. We leave for like a month or 6 weeks or 2 weeks or 1 week, right? And when we're at home, we have our standard things that we do. And when we're on the road, some of those things will come with us, but also we will absolutely drop a lot of things so that we can really absorb what we're learning about in the place that we're learning about it. And there's no better place, especially as a hands-on learner, there's no better place to learn about something than in that actual place. So like for instance, if you want to learn about science and photosynthesis and erosion and all those things, like go get out in the woods, right? We used to take field trips. I was gobsmacked. I went to a writers' conference about a month ago, and there was a woman there who teaches public school. She's a writer. She teaches public school, high school public school, and she's a writer. And she was talking about emulating what school really looks like in your book so that you can relate to your readers. And I was really surprised at all the things that you now no longer can do, like no more field trips. I didn't know that. And field trips, of course, as a hands-on learner, like field trips were like, right? We all looked forward to the field trips. We were like, we're not missing school that day. Like that is the absolute funnest time. And so I think that's really essential. So we like to really get out there, but we'll talk about the differences between when we're home and not traveling and when we're traveling. So actually, let's talk about when we're traveling first. So when we're traveling, our homeschool looks like this. My kids always have a ton of books that they always bring with them. and they're always reading them. And we really do like to shut electronics off at night at about 10:30. You know, as a homeschool family, we don't have strict bedtimes. We certainly don't have early bedtimes. So I like to shut everything down at about 10:30. And honestly, you can read as long as you want and go for it. I really believe, and this is so controversial, I think you could never like really study anything like traditionally, like textbooks or lectures or research or anything like that, and you could just read and you could learn more than I think probably most people do, because we've just stopped reading, right? And even as a writer and a reader myself, like I find I will get caught up in doing all the tediousness of the day. But if you just always kept reading, the amount of learning that happens just from reading, and it doesn't have to be biographical or nonfiction or my son loved to read encyclopedias about animals, right? It doesn't have to be that stuff. Like our stories, the world is built on oral tradition, which are just stories, right? Historical fiction is what we call it now. But that is how most of the world has been built, and most of the world has lived off of is their oral traditions. And so our stories are so important. And even when we just write fiction stories and stories about characters that we've created or characters that we love, you know, like the Hunger Games or Harry Potter, like we learned so much about human interaction. You know, like J.K. Rowling didn't come up with a night bus. J.K. Rowling didn't come up with like these spells. These are historical things that have been passed down from like the Knights at the Round Table. Like this is not new. There's so much history, so much rich history in Harry Potter. And then the Hunger Games, you know, you learn a lot about psychological things, about human nature, about interactions within people. So, and then like take the Giver series, you know, all of these things, like what would happen, and the philosophical questions that we're faced with, like what would happen if we didn't know about color? What would happen if we lost all of our senses? Like we really have the ability to empathize and sympathize with our characters, and we learn so much. So that was a little tangent, but reading, we always have time for reading. Reading is so important and such a critical element of our human existence. So we always do that. And then really the rest of our time is just about enmeshing ourselves within the culture that we're in. So that means eating the food. So we have been to Korea and we ate snails and we ate bondegi, which are silkworms, and we ate octopus. So really eating the food that the cultures eat. And how else do you get to do that, right? Like we don't have that kind of stuff available to us where we live. And so going to that place and really enmeshing yourself in that culture, I think teaches you so much. Like, why do they eat these things? So we learn all these things. Like, why did they eat silkworms? What are silkworms? What do silkworms do? Like, what's the effect of silkworms on the body? What do they taste like? Like, we learn so much about so many different subjects just by eating the culture of a specific country, just by eating the same food that they have. And we have an appreciation for it. When we first went to Korea, we went and ate somewhere. And I remember describing, it's chicken galbi. So if you are familiar with Korean food, in Korea, they have this round, it's literally a round dish. And in the outside of the dish is cheese. And in the inside is chicken and vegetables and all, you know, an amalgamation of incredible food. Okay. The first time, and it's one of my favorite things of all time. The first time we ate it, I said, this is literally seaweed covered in hot sauce. And that's all I knew. I was just like so overwhelmed with how different it was. And I could not take hot food. But if you go to Korea, you should know, like, you got to get over that really quick. Everything you eat, even if they tell you it's mild, it's not going to be mild. But yeah, so we learned a ton about the food and the culture from that. And then it inevitably leads to questions like, well, why is the food so spicy? And why do they eat this way? And how much culture plays into historical records and current culture. So we emphasize that a lot. Then we go around to the local markets, and I'm not talking shopping malls, although we do that. But we do like old like the old, like what would be in America would be like farmers markets or like mom and pop stores. So we try and go see those when we go travel and really and talk to the locals. And we also really try and speak the language. Now, Korean was so hard. That is like one of the hardest languages ever to learn, but we really tried our best. And there were actually some free language go to every Sunday. And we really, really tried to, if we couldn't learn at least a part, because obviously I'm not saying that in, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, even 6 weeks, we could learn a language, but we would try and use it as much as we could. So that is a huge part of it. We also just go and see all the monuments, all the historical places, even the tourist places, right? But we really try and go and see everything that we can, because you learn about the history of a place, and that teaches you about the interactions that they've had with other countries. Like when we were in Korea, we learned about the conflict that I will be honest, I was not aware of really how North Korea and South Korea had been divided. So we did that. We went to the DMZ. We went and saw North Korea through the, binoculars. We walked through the tunnels that the North Koreans had built to try and infiltrate South Korea. Like we did it all. So I absolutely love that. So that's what it looks like when we are on the road. When we are at home, we do have a much more structured schedule, though it changes. And my philosophy is, and maybe we should talk about this in a minute, but my philosophy is that play should always come first. I don't care how old you are. Like life is about being joyous and having joy, and play should always come first. So I have a hard time remembering that when my kids are being really defiant or they haven't been keeping up to date. But like yesterday, okay, Sunday, we have this big talk about challenging yourself, about finding out what is something you want to learn how to do. Every month as a family, we try and set goals for ourselves. And we've been really busy, and our kids just have kind of fallen behind a little bit in terms of what they want to accomplish. So we had this big discussion on Sunday, like challenging yourself and meeting your goals. And then Monday, a friend called and they were like, "Hey, do you want to go to the park?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." And we should talk about socialization, because that is a whole other thing. There's a really funny meme that says, "I do not think that word means what you think it means," right? Back to Princess Bride. But play, and how much do our friendships mean, right? Even friendships, husband and wife friendships, right? Sibling friendships outside the family, like they really, really do matter. They help us develop as a human being. They help teach us like how we should interact, how we should talk to other people. So I always say play really, really matters. And as a homeschooling mom, I also want to make sure that my kids have enough time to pursue the things that they want to. That's something that has really upset me about the thought of public school, because I don't really know. My kids have never gone to public school, but when I see my other friends and other kids in school, one thing that bothers me, and it may not bother everybody, and obviously that's okay, but I want my kids to have free time. And yes, they may not be the best violinist in the world. We actually went to a candlelight concert, and my daughter and I, who plays the violin, and we were talking to one of the violinists in the quartet, and he was like, "You've got to practice like 10 hours a day." And I was like, what is the point of that? To be the best? Because he admitted, like, he's like, I'm not having fun anymore, but this is how I was raised in a Chinese family, and this is what I had to do. And I was just like, and so then he was telling my daughter, but if you want to be the best, this is what you have to do. And I was like, I don't know, that's what I want for my kids. We have a comment from Jackson. "You're a smart mom for teaching your kids with your husband." Hey, that is really, really consider. The public school system is lazy. So I am not going to say anything about the public school system, because I don't know. My kids never went to the public school system. All I'll say is I do not feel like it is for us. And I am a little bit horrified by the things that I hear. So my children, like I was just saying, my children may not be the best violinists. They may not get full ride scholarships for certain things, but I do really believe that finding joy is really important. So, okay. So going back to what school. And thank you for your comments. And if you have a question about how homeschooling anything or what I do homeschooling, I started the stream saying, like, if you came here for an expert opinion, you're in for a wild ride, because I'm only an expert in my own opinion. So when we're at home, we do subscribe to a program called IXL. I'm not sponsored, but I do really like it. So it's like a play on the words excel, like excel in something. And they do a variety of subjects, but I chose math for it because I couldn't even deal with my kids and doing math. Like I did not have the patience for it. Like when they didn't understand like math concepts, I didn't have it in my wheelhouse to be able to explain it. And I found that this program, it shows them videos of how to do it and it goes over how to do it. And it's really intuitive. So if they're not getting a concept, then they can watch a video on it, or it will say, hey, you're probably not ready for this one. Why don't you try this one first? So I love that. I found out the Texas public school system just puts their kids on computers and they use IXL. So we're not doing anything different than the public school system is. And my kids, well, I will say they weren't doing great at it. Best Family Reviews has a comment. If you like the channel and like what she's saying, hit that button. I'm learning so much already. Just a thank you. That is my husband, but thank you. I would appreciate that. Okay, so with IXL, I found that my kids could easily coast along. In fact, we just did a 1-year review of where my kids, I'm showing a graph right here about where my kids started and what they accomplished after a year. They were doing it every couple of days for a half an hour every single day. And they weren't really moving up in that graph, right? I would want to see the graph moving like this, and it really wasn't. So that goes for a couple of my kids. A couple of my kids, the graph was moving like this. And you can tell, right? Some of your kids love certain subjects and some of them don't. And to that end, I feel like as adults, we don't pursue things that we don't love, right? Like I'm not a biologist. And so I never have to do biology as an adult. Does that mean that our kids should never learn biology? I don't agree with that. It also doesn't mean that I don't ever do biology. I do biology all the time, right? Biology is just an inherent part of living, but I feel like we can learn the basics and then we can pursue things that we love. That's just my opinion. But I do feel like they needed to be challenging themselves because math, right? Math's all around us too. So I really felt like we had to pivot. So now what we do with IXL, instead of just saying, hey, you only have to do a half an hour on these designated days, now you have to actually take a topic and you have to master it. And they grade you a scale of 1 to 100. And once you've passed 80, you've mastered it and you can move on. So now when they sit down, they have to master a skill every single time. And that could be a half an hour. If it only takes 15 minutes, they have to master another one. But if it takes a half an hour, it might take 2 hours. But they feel more fulfilled. They're actually loving it. Another comment, I had no idea about public school and IXL. That is crazy, but honestly more effective. Yeah. I mean, what I learned from this public school teacher is that public school teachers spend the majority of their time managing, right? They're just managers. They're managing kids from getting themselves into trouble. So they're either preventing fights, preventing kids from leaving the classroom to go beat up other kids. In fact, I found out that the new law in Texas about cell phones is not because kids were getting distracted in class or they weren't doing their schoolwork. It's because they were using cell phones to communicate with other students in other classes to go pick on kids that left to go to the bathroom, or finding out where those kids, one of them would befriend one of the kids, find out where they were going to be after school, and then go literally abuse, literally assault them. So that was a huge thing. So I have found that almost all kids are on computers during class. And then the teacher is just at the front of the class watching kids and watching all of their screens. So it's like a surveillance system, and they're just watching all of their screens and they're shutting them down. If they're doing anything inappropriate that they're not supposed to be doing. So, I kind of employ a similar thing at home, right? But I can do that at home. I don't need to send them off to do that. So, okay. So when we're at home, reading is still a huge part of it. We also do math, which when we're on the road and we have a laptop and we have a down day, we are still doing math and we're still doing that stuff. We do a lot of spelling. So Spelling is something I think is so fun to do in the car because you can trick your kids by giving them spelling words of like signs they keep seeing. And if they're not paying it, so my kids have caught on because they know, oh, we probably will be able to see this word, but it gets them paying attention, right? And that's something that I think is a skill that I've learned as a parent. That's a skill that kids really are lacking and really need to know is how to pay attention to their surroundings. Another thing we love to do when we are on road trips is do trivia. So we look up trivia, parents in the front seat, we look up trivia about the place that we're going or the place we just left or the road trip that we're on, like the stretch of road that we're on or state facts or stuff. And then we quiz the kids. So it's either multiple choice or we tell them a statement and leave out like a necessary part of it. And like, what is that missing part? And then they have to guess. And then we stop at gas stations and get candy and they get like a reward for getting a question right. And the last time we did it, I was like, okay, you can each we can either pick a bag of candy, like a bag of Jolly Ranchers. And when you get a question right, you can get a Jolly Rancher, or you can get a full-size candy bar, but you have to get like 5 questions or 10 questions right. I can't remember what I did. And that was a lot harder because they really had to, keep track. So they had to keep track of how many they'd gotten. And then it was like, well, who answered it first? And then they got the point, nobody else. Whereas before, everybody that got it right would get a candy. So that's really fun. Okay. So when we're at home, we do math, reading, spelling, something we do no matter where we are. I am going through some biology courses with my kids. Because I'm a philosophy major, I still have all of my philosophy books. And so that's something new we're going to start. We're going to start talking about those really in-depth questions because I think learning how to think, right? Learning how to think critically. In fact, one of the podcasts that I really want to do is about Hitler because everybody blames Hitler and the Nazis. When you think about World War II, the first thing that comes to your mind is Hitler, but it's just not true. It's not fair to pin everything on Hitler. If he didn't have people that followed him, then it never would have happened. And so I think so probably one of the most important skills we need to learn as a human race is how to think critically. And philosophy offers that. So, and then I started off the stream talking about the current discussion group we're doing. So I came up with a huge list of questions and my kids can add to this if they want. But I was like having a blast thinking about all these things that I thought would be so fun for my kids to research. And one of them is like, well, we haven't been to Korea in, 4 years now. How much do you remember? And how much will this jog your memory? So a whole list of questions. They have to come up with a PowerPoint slide. They have to present what they learned to a group of their peers. And then each student in the class or each kid in the class does a PowerPoint. They each take 10 minutes, 6 students, 10 minutes. They present it and then they discuss it. So some of the questions are, Korea, how did North and South Korea become divided, right? So lots of historical things. What happened when the Titanic? How did the Titanic, sink? So those are some historical questions. There's one that my son really wants to do, which is, are dinosaurs really dragons? Because there's a lot of lore out there that suggests that they might be. So these don't have to be like set in stone, like historical accuracies or set in stone, like facts or rules. Like I want my kids to really think outside the box. Like, can current social media algorithms manipulate us, right? Like that's a question. Can humans control the weather? Like that's another question. Like a lot of like just current event questions that are so embedded in our children growing up in the world and being able to navigate it. So I think that's really cool. So those are kind of the things that we're doing. So let's check the time and let's look at my list of questions. Okay. Okay, this is a great one. How do you handle subjects you're not strong in, or you just don't feel like you have the mental capacity, like math, for instance, for me? Well, for a while, my husband was doing all the math. I was like, I can't. I can't. or you get a program, right? So there are my kids have a friend who just takes a few subjects from Charlotte Mason. So she just signed up for some of them. She doesn't do the full curriculum, but she has signed up for a few. So you can just outsource some of those. Depending on where you live, your kids can go to public school for just a subject or a half a day. It all depends on the state that you live in, or the school district you live in. So that's not necessarily available to everybody, but that is something that I have found is a great resource. And then, of course, there are a ton of YouTube videos, YouTube tutorials. There's all sorts of like online academies, like for math. We chose IXL, but there's like a Khan Academy, and there's just so many. There was, I lost it. I was going to say something about, this is what I was going to say. I found this incredible. This woman used to be a chemistry teacher at school. And she decided to, I don't know why she stopped, but she instead decided to put her knowledge and put them all into YouTube videos. So she has an entire YouTube channel dedicated to chemistry, and it just starts at the beginning and goes all the way through. And she's got worksheets, and she's got an adjoining website that you can go to get information from, and all of that. And so I started my kids on that, and then I was like, okay, you actually need a basis in biology first, and then we can move on to chemistry. So that's why we started doing the biology, so that then they can go on and use this resource. It's totally free. There are so many websites that are totally free to get worksheets. I started creating my own worksheets on Google Drive, and then I just save them. So as the next children come up, they can move up and they can do it. And I've already got them prepared. Because I'm a writer and I love writing and reading in English, I don't outsource that at all. I love it. I did go online and come up with like some ideas for certain things, but then one day I just went through and I used ChatGPT because of the time, right? I love to write, but compiling information, I actually am very against AI, except for the things that that are almost like programmable, right? So like, I don't like AI for like, don't let AI think for you. Don't let AI write for you. Don't let AI do art for you. But if it's like programmable, I think AI is great. So I came up with all the assignments that I wanted my kids to have access to for writing. And then I just went into ChatGPT and I was like, will you just write me out instructions for this is what I want them to do. And it did the whole thing. It was like a rubric system. And it was, here, I can show you. Okay. So it came up with the objective. What is it? Instructions. So how to do it. Really nicely, neatly written out. Creativity notes. So alternate ways that they could do it. Grading criteria. And then optional extensions. So more ways that as a parent, I could decide for them to do it. And then, of course, they always offer me other things that they can add on to it. But sometimes they include bonus options. If it's a design requirement, they have me do that. It also will help me come up with like programs they could use. So like my kids did. So like for writing, my kids have, actually, I have an entire list. So I will just tell you what they are. Sorry. Okay, so the entire list of like writing assignments that I had ChatGPT help me with, and then I just kept them in a folder that my kids always have access to. So when it's time for a writing assignment, they don't all have to do the same one because, you know, sometimes you don't feel like doing one thing, but it sounds really fun a month later. So create a newsletter for a camp that they went to. Write an ad for a service that you can perform for the community, how to use AI. I kind of just talked about that and why that matters to me. Write a resume. So some of these things, you're not going to have your 6-year-old write a resume. Well, your 6-year-old's probably not going to be doing much of this, but like your 10-year-old, maybe your 10-year-old's not going to be, but your 14, 15-year-olds, that's going to be essential. Rewrite a fairy tale, right? And this can just be like a short one. It doesn't have to be like a huge long one. write a comic book, we do lots of essays. Every time my kids ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I have a notebook. I have like a keep notes in my phone and I just type it in there. And then the next time we're going to write an essay, I go pull up from that list. And that is phenomenal. And lots of times when they ask a question, we just go look it up, right? But if it's a circumstance where we can't, or it's just question after question after question, it's like we were on a hike the other day and we had all these questions. So we just wrote them all down. Design a book jacket, design a travel brochure, do a literary scavenger hunt. So you have to go into different books and find answers on pages. Oh, it's so fun. Write a story using creative writing dice. So these are something I have. Yes, right here. Okay, check out these dice. So these writing dice. And then if you have a question about like, what do you need your what's your conflict, right? So it can be justice, hope, like what do you need your character to do next? If you have like an element you need, bring in a shapeshifter or an immigrant, right? So it's got all these different ideas. Who should my next like omniscient outsider, like who should my narrator be? Should it be the protagonist? Should it be a minor character? Should it be an outsider, right? So these creative dice are really fun. So you roll these dice and then you have to pick, you have to include everything from every dice wherever it landed. So you roll all of them out and then all the ones that face up, you have to include all those elements in your story. So that's really fun. Blackout poetry. If you don't know what that is, you just get like a newspaper and you black out everything except the words that you want your poem to have. That one's really fun. A one-pager is really a one-pager. Listen to a book podcast and do your own. Listen to a TED Talk and then write your own TED Talk. Create a rap out of a children's book that you love. Agree or disagree statement worksheets. Personify grab bag items. So you put a bunch of items in a bag and they have to write using personification about those items in the bag, analyze song lyrics, do a diorama. So all these things. So I have one of these for English. I have one of these for science right now. Obviously we're doing that biology work right now, but yeah, so I guess that was a tangent from how do you handle topics that you don't feel skilled in. That's one I do feel skilled in, but outsource it, right? Listen to podcasts like this and outsource like the stuff you don't know. I just gave you at least 30 ideas right there. So if English is not your strong suit, go find a podcast about it and use their ideas. Like you're not stealing them. We're all learning from each other. Okay. Another question. Oh, yes. Let's talk about socialization. So the question I have is how do you keep socialization healthy and meaningful? Well, I think the first thing we need to do is define what socialization is, because people think that socialization is interacting with your peers, and it's just not true. So if you consider public school kids, they sit in the same classroom with the same cohort for, 12 grades? No, it's 14 if you put them in pre-K. That is not socialization. It's learning how to interact with the same group of people with the same expectations and the same grade that you are over and over and over again. So as you move up in the grade, so are your peers, and you're all at the same level, and you're not learning how to interact with other grades. You may have different kids in your class, especially when you get into middle school and high school and you're changing classrooms. And you'll have different teachers, of course, but the teacher is always the authority figure. And so you're not learning how to interact with different authority figures. You're not learning how to approach different styles of authority. You're not learning how to interact in different dynamics of different people in different class structures or social structures, right? That's what socialization is about. The true nature of socialization is how to behave in all social situations. And frankly, public school does not teach you. And I don't have to have sent my kid. I went to public school. I know, everybody knows, let's be honest, that school does not teach you how to interact in all social situations. Okay. We learn how to socialize when we go to church because we have peers, different age groups, multiple different teachers, usually a pastor or a preacher. And then we have clergy. We have Sunday school teachers. We have a variety of different types of social structures within a church. You don't have to go to church to be social, right? So at the grocery store, we learn how to be social. We have to figure out where items are, and we have to ask somebody. We have to find out the people who can help us. We interact with the manager of a store different than we interact with a cashier, different than we interact with somebody stocking the shelves, different than we interact with strangers that we meet as we're passing through a grocery store. Like tell me how going to school is going to teach your kid how not to walk in front of somebody else's cart. And school doesn't teach kids that, and neither does homeschool, because no kid knows how to not do it. Like no kid knows how to not walk in front of somebody else, right? But those are social skills and social cues that you learn from being out in society. Other places that we learn socialization, obviously the playground, because again, at public school, you're with the same group of kids over and over and over and over again. How do you learn how to interact with kids that are not the kids that you already know? And I'll tell you what, homeschoolers are better than that, than anybody, because they are forced to meet new kids all the time. And they don't have the only group of kids. Yeah, they have friends, but especially when you're world schooling like we were, the only kids that my kids knew were their each other, their own siblings. So you have to learn how to make friends outside of the people that you interact with every single day, all the time. And for a public school kid, that's going to be everybody that you go to school with. So that is true socialization, where you are learning from the societal structure of the world you live in and the different social interactions that you have within that world. So like I already said, grocery store, church, playground, and then anywhere that you go, the mall, the movie theater. I don't know why my mind is blanking, but we have all sorts of situations that we encounter all day long, and we just have to learn how to interact in those. And that is what socialization is. So I don't worry about socialization, especially as a world schooling family, because we are out and about all the time. And I know very few homeschool kids that just sit at home. I don't know any homeschool kids that just sit at home. They're all out and about. And so that's where they learn it. That's what real socialization is. What I will say is, when it comes to, I lost it again. This is now twice. I've lost it. It'll come back to me. It came back to me before. Okay. What is the biggest failure I learned from, and how did I adjust when it came to homeschooling? Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. I am constantly pivoting. What I'm doing today is not even what I was doing 2 months ago. And what I was doing 2 months ago is not even what I was doing 2 months before. So the main constants when it comes to homeschooling is reading. We always read, and we always learn from reading. I do a lot of reading aloud with my kids. So we pick a story. That's not true. I pick a story, and then I read it to them, and then we spend a lot of time talking about it. And sometimes they're just fun books, and sometimes they're more serious. And we're going to start a philosophy book, like I mentioned earlier in the stream. And we'll be talking a lot about that. But we just read a book. We were reading Fahrenheit 451, and that brought up a lot of questions. And then we read C.S. Lewis' Screwtape Letters. And that messes with you so much because it's written from the point of view of a demon. So that was wild. Hello, Rodrigo. Thank you for the comment. It's so great to have you. So I would say the biggest failure was sticking with something that wasn't working for too long. And kids need change. I try and gamify the system as much as possible, right? Because we talked about play. We all have incentives. I guarantee, if you are watching this, there is nothing that you do without an incentive. You go to work, your incentive is a paycheck, right? And a roof over your head. You go on a date, your incentive is you want to have a great time with this person, maybe pursue a future relationship. When you save money, it's because you want to do something with that money. We all have incentive, and we don't do anything unless we have incentive for it. But we expect our kids to do stuff without incentive. At least I did for a while. Not recognizing how important the incentive was. And for kids, just doing it for the sake of doing something and having the pleasure and the satisfaction of doing it is not enough for them. And I do try and balance out like things they want to do and things I want them to do, because the things they want to do, that's their incentive. But the things I want them to do, they need incentive for. So that's why we set goals as a family. So what else? Other failures. Yeah, it's just constant adjustment, constant looking at what is working and what isn't working, and how we need to pivot and how we need to change. And each kid is going to be so different. Like I told that story at the beginning of how my youngest or my middle daughter just didn't want to learn how to read. And so waiting for them to be ready for a topic, I mean, that is one of the greatest advantages to homeschooling is when you're in public school, you have to stick with the program and you have to do it on the schedule. But in homeschooling, you don't have to do that. You can choose what is working for you. And if you need to spend longer on a concept, and you can go with that flow. And that I think is so paramount. So I think my biggest failure is rigidly sticking to something that isn't working and knowing it's not working, but trying to force it anyway and doing it for way too long. So once I figured out we need to be pivoting constantly, then that made a huge, huge difference. All right. Next question. Oh, okay. These are 3 really good ones. What do you say to family members who doubt homeschooling? Well, I think it probably depends on what family members doubt your homeschooling and how much stock you put in their opinion. If it bothers you, I have found, I mean, when something bothers you, it's usually a reflection of yourself and not a reflection of that person. So for me, I am very confident, but that has come because I have teenagers now and I've seen their successes. If you're early and starting out homeschooling, you may not have that confidence, and that's okay. You'll get it. Don't worry about it. And don't give up. Don't think that your kids have to meet certain milestones or have to get to a certain spot. If they are happy and you are happy, you don't have to emulate an 8-hour classroom. In fact, they did studies that showed that up to high school, once your kids are like high school age, they really only need 2 hours a day. That's all they need. And the rest they will fill in because they have they've discovered this love of learning, right? And I'm not talking like the time that they spend with their musical instrument. My kids are very involved in music. And I'm not talking about the time they spend reading. I'm talking about active learning new things. Instruction is only 2 hours a day. But our kids are in public school for so long because they are competing with so many other kids. And so if you are new to this, just know you're amazing. I don't need to know who you are. I don't need to know what your credentials are because they don't matter. All I need to know is that you have a commitment to do it and you are doing it right and you're doing an amazing job. And that's all that matters. So if somebody doubts you, that really honestly is their issue. And it's usually coming from their issues as feeling like they couldn't do it. And people that feel like they can't do it just really haven't thought about it, because everybody can do it. Every single person on the planet. You are the steward of your own child and you know what's best for them. And that's what it boils down to. Okay, next question. What age is the hardest to homeschool and why? Okay, everybody's going to have a different opinion about this, but this is my opinion, of course. I'm an expert in my own opinion. Okay, there was a huge study done in countries around the world of the people with the happiest outcomes. So people that were happy in their lives, happy in where they were, their careers, their spouses, their families, getting up every day, just the happiness overall factor. And what they found out is that the countries with the happiest outcomes, the happiest people, delayed any sort of formal educational instruction until double digits. So that's 10 years old. And up until 10 years old, all they did was play. They went outside and played. Yeah, they still went to school. These are kids that are in public school. The public school system just let them play. But lots of opportunities of playing, building through play, right? You're learning physics, you're learning mechanics, you're learning how pieces fit together, right? Going outside and playing. You're learning about nature. And they just talked. They just talked about the trees that they were climbing and the flowers that they were seeing and the way that the weather was behaving and the types of clouds that were up in the sky and the color of everything. So it was just play. And I have found by adopting that there's no hard age to homeschool because all kids want to do is play. So just let them play. When you're on a road trip, do the spelling. It's fun. They think it's fun. They've got to sit in the car anyway. And I do not do tests. I do not do tests and I do not do grades. My kids have started asking for grades because they've probably heard and learned about it. But your grade is dependent on the effort that you put in. And you already know the effort that you put in. Our kids know the effort that they put in. They know if they did it good enough or not. And over time, once they start to care more about it, they'll put in more effort towards it. And the more that they learn about something, they'll put more effort into it. And I don't think your output measures what your input is. And so I don't do it. And I found that grades mess with a kid's psyche so much. It mess with my psyche so much. And tests mess with so much because you're just so hyper-focused on getting the questions right. Who cares about what you're learning? Who cares about what you've been able to put into your head and retain? All that matters is what you get right on the test. And that's why I can't help my kids with math now because I passed math. I got pretty far in math in high school and in college and science and whatever. But we're having to relearn it because all we learned was how to put it on a math test. But then you talk to your husband and his brain, if he's like mine, is full of the most interesting things that my brain doesn't have room for. But it's because he's interested in those things. And those things matter to him because they're fascinating to him and they're things that he wants to know. And those are the things that stick up there, not the stuff that's on a test that some arbitrary state administrator decided that it was important for you to be able to retain for a brief moment to be able to answer on a test. So we don't do that. All right. And I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for everybody sticking around today. It was super fun to talk about this. Obviously, I'm super, super passionate about it. But we'll do one last question. What do I wish I knew when I started? And I think that question I've already answered. Actually, we're going to answer one more after this, but I really already answered this one. I wish I knew that all I needed was a desire to give my kids the best life. And that's it. And we all want that for our kids. That's what public school parents want. That's what homeschool parents want. And that's why I don't fault anybody for anything that they're doing. And that's why my opinion is not more important than your opinion. That's why I'm only an expert in my own opinion, because we are all just trying to do the best that we can. And for some people, that will look like sending our kids to public school. And for some people, that will look like bringing our kids home. And for some people, that will look like hanging back and not forcing our kids to do stuff. And for some like mine, it'll be like, we're going to do a lot of reading and writing. That's what I wish I knew. I'm sorry. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know Spanish. So I'm sorry, but thank you for your comments. Okay. And the last question, this is the one we're really going to close it out on, is what do you need to stop comparing yourself to homeschool moms? You know what I say? Go ahead and compare yourself. There is no harm, right? We're always told I'm actually writing a book about Ace Fable, be careful what you wish for. And another way of saying that is the grass is always greener on the other side. We live in a world that tells us we should just be content. We should just worry about making happiness where we are. And if we're happy with where we are, then we can always be happy. Well, I completely disagree with that. I think we should always be striving to be and get more of what we want out of life. Like for me, I want to travel more. Like we haven't been traveling for a couple years. And if I were to just say, well, we have a nice house and we have a good job, and so I'm happy, then I wouldn't strive for something more. So let's compare each other. Don't take me the wrong way. Like we shouldn't be like, oh, she's so much better than I am, or he's so much better than I am, or they're doing stuff I'm not doing. If they're doing stuff that you're not doing that you think you should do, then go do it. Like, that's awesome. Like I'm taking ideas from people all the time. In fact, the whole reason we're doing this discussion with other kids is because I found out some other moms were like, I felt like my kids were missing interaction. And I was like, my kids are missing that. And I'm not talking about interaction like social interaction. I'm talking about like hearing what other kids have to say about the same topic, right? On their level. I think that's so important. But one thing I don't want to do, and I'm very, very, very insistent about this, which is one of the reasons I personally don't want public school, is I don't want somebody teaching my children what to think. I want to teach them how to think, and I will, by all means, give them my opinion, just like I'm giving you my opinion right now. But at the end of the day, what I tell my kids all the time is, you need to decide why you think this and be able to back it up. Because if somebody presents you with a question and they're like, well, why do you think that? And you can't answer them, then you don't really have an opinion. You're just reiterating what somebody else told you. You don't have an opinion until you can form an argument yourself. And when that argument is questioned, you can actually answer the question with a reasoned, seasoned answer. So that's what I want for my kids, is I want them to be able to be questioned and be able to have their own opinions and their own ideas about things instead of just regurgitating. So when you see other homeschool parents, it's really like unfair to say moms, but when we see other homeschool parents doing something that we wish we were doing, then do it. I mean, what other answer is there? That's the only answer there is. If we see other parents doing something that we don't want to do, then great. Don't do that. Don't do that. But do recognize that whatever those parents are doing, whether it's something you would or wouldn't do, they have done it because they have thought about it, and they've thought about it with their kids in mind. And all of our kids are different. And that's what homeschooling allows us to do, is look at each of our kids in a different light and do what's best for them. And frankly, the public school system just can't offer that. And it can't offer that because it's just too big. And I'm not saying there's anything derogatory about that. I'm just saying you can't give individualized attention to too many people. It's not possible. So, all right, I will leave you with that. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Of course, I would love it if you liked and subscribed. We are going to have this be a regular Tuesday afternoon occurrence. Tuesday's a great day for me. It works out really well. And so I hope that you'll join me with our next podcast. Next week, we are going to talk about why we should all be talking about Charlie Kirk. And if you're wondering what these topics are going to be about, they're just going to be about conversations I'm having with my own children, or conversations I'm having with my husband about our children, or conversations that I'm having with myself about homeschooling my children. It's not all about homeschool. It's just about raising kids. We are diapers on a plane. This is all about our family interactions and navigating the world and getting along with it. We'll probably talk about fertility. We'll probably talking about raising kids with diseases. And, we didn't talk about that today, but that's one of the reasons, we don't send our kids to public school, because we have a child with type 1 diabetes. And that is a nightmare. That is an absolute nightmare, sending your child with any sort of persistent chronic disease, especially something like diabetes that involves everything they eat. It involves regulating emotions. Emotions can change your blood sugar level. It can change your insulin input. It can change all of that. And it's an absolute regulatory nightmare with kids with pumps and insulin needs and food. They can't just eat food in class if they need to. They can't just take insulin in class if they need to. It all has to go through the nurse. It all has to follow like a written up plan. It cannot deviate from it. And that is not real life. So we'll probably talk about that on this channel. And we'll talk about current events, because these are the things that have to do with raising kids in the world. So thank you again. I'm very long-winded, but thank you again for watching. Thanks for tuning in with us today. I hope I will see you next Tuesday. And meanwhile, take a look at some of our other videos and have a great, blessed day.